The population I'm presenting on is the homeless adult population, concerning environmental and cultural factors that affect them. The first cultural environmental factor is the media and their portrayal of this population. News either discusses success stories with this population, or they display individuals involved in drugs, or display them as statistics. This portrayal shows a very small portion of the homeless population, and the statistics typically take out the humanity of the reality. TV and movies typically play into stereotypes. The population, they're either being displayed as crazy, addicted to drugs, or dressed in raggedy clothing. This creates dangerous boxes that we categorize them in and think that they only exist in, when that is untrue. And these inaccuracies cause the population to be at greater risk for being misunderstood, as if they're portrayed as dangerous or crazy, that limits people's desires to interact or help them. Family support is lacking in the majority of this population. More families are experiencing homelessness in the U.S. than any other industrialized nation, which is unfortunate. A typical homeless family consists of a single mother and 2 young children. Runaway youth often find themselves facing homelessness, or also young adults that have no financial assistance from their family can also face this. A lack of family support contributes to the outcomes of this population facing homelessness when younger, which increases their likelihood to face it later in life. The social pressures of the homeless population consists a lot of smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol around the shelters. There was a study conducted interviewing why people haven't stopped smoking or factors that contribute to it. And some of the homeless populations say that there's a strong pressure to either start smoking or to resume smoking, either just as a social activity, but it's also just the norm for this population. So they're unable to have the support to stop. Homelessness is very cyclical in nature. It often begins with the loss of a job or the reception of unexpected bills that exceed an income, leading to them not being able to be paid. The programs that offer aid to the homeless individuals often require home addresses, so these individuals cannot gain the assistance to get jobs or something like that. If they do land jobs, rarely any jobs pay cash. They all do direct deposit or checks. Checks, they all require a bank. A bank account requires a home address. So the cycle of homelessness continues as all of these factors contribute. Children raised in homelessness usually have low literacy and vocabulary rates. This leads to them being unable to pass standardized tests through school, decreasing their school performance, increasing probably social anxiety, and anxiety in general, which decreases their performance as well. This leads to higher dropout rates and limits future opportunities for the population, and this continues the cycle of homelessness and poverty. As they grow up, they have less opportunities, and that continues on with their own families. Federal funding and reallocation of resources were increased in the Housing First model in 2017. The purpose to assist in housing subsidization for homelessness or those in poverty. It's argued that this actually created more problems, such as misallocation of these funds and rent seeking from not the homeless population, more of those on the poverty line. Each state has its own assistance programs for the homeless. Utah.gov offers various links to funding and grants to those eligible to apply, as well as resources for jobs, resources for domestic violence as well. Local support's usually found through shelters and ministries that serve this population, and actually Salt Lake has quite a few, which I didn't know before I researched this population. Some potential barriers. Research shows that homeless people are stigmatized as much as those that are mentally hospitalized, and this becomes difficult because most homeless individuals actually do have mental diagnoses as well, usually unmanaged either by not taking their meds or lack of access to a pharmacy, making them twice as stigmatized by the general population. There's also a tendency to blame a homeless person for their own predicament by most people, and this creates a barrier to the community wanting to help or helping to provide assistance, because if you thought that they're the reason they're in a situation, less likely to help. On an international scope, there wasn't much I could find that a certain country or region would shun this population, but they are in danger themselves because across the United States, there's an increase in criminalization of homelessness and the habits associated with it. Not saying that that is acted upon. Obviously, we all see homeless people sleeping somewhere, camping somewhere, but it does create a strain on resources when they could be used somewhere else. There's a lot of new laws, such as banning camping in public, banning sleeping in public, banning begging in public, and banning sleeping in vehicles is actually being increasingly seen. Homeless individuals typically have a low socioeconomic status, along with many other social determinants of health being unmet, and this leads to a decreased health outcome in them. Little to no income can lead to homelessness. This status also leads to unhealthy food choices due to either necessity or availability of food. As stated previously, this population often faces social pressure to participate in smoking, substance use, alcohol use, which all contributes to poor health outcomes. And most, if not all, of this population does not regularly see a doctor due to access, lack of insurance, all of those factors. A low socioeconomic status goes hand in hand with the lack of economic stability, lack of social and community support, lack of education or opportunity, and a lack of preventative health care. African Americans account for 40% of the homeless population. This is obviously disproportionate to their representation in the general population. There are many factors that can contribute to this unequal representation, such as access to education, lack of familial support, and unstable housing situations. Religious groups are becoming more and more involved in the efforts to help homeless individuals, although it has been a long connection throughout. Obviously, many religious practices help the poor, help the needy. There is a study that was done, and there's a correlation between religious affiliation, and the increase in that correlates to a more positive perception of the homeless individuals. With a more positive perception, religious groups or those associated with religion are more likely to assist the homeless population. Most services provided by this group are typically food and meals, maybe some shelter. There is one in Salt Lake called St. Vincent de Paul Dining Hall, which provides 3 hot meals a day for homeless individuals. Gender-wise, men make up about 70% of the homeless population, while women make up 29%. As stated previously, homelessness affects health poorly through the lack of resources to food, shelter, and medical care. Even though men are a higher representation in this population, the health outcomes are decreased in both. The LGBTQ youth that face family rejection are highly likely to become homeless in their youth, and this homelessness decreases their academic performance, opportunities for jobs, and their health outcomes. Geographical locations can affect health outcomes in a couple ways. The first being temperature extremes in some areas can expose the population either to frigid cold temperatures or overexposure to heat with no relief, as well as barriers to access to pharmacies, grocery stores, doctors' offices, either by lack of public transportation, too far for them to walk, something like that. Telehealth and telemedicine could be beneficial to this population if it was accessible financially to them. They often are uninsured, leaving them with an inability to have these services. For biases, implicit bias, there's a study done. A part of our brain categorizes someone as highly human when we direct emotions like pity and pride towards them. This action happens at a lower frequency with people who belong to stigmatized groups, such as homeless individuals. Our implicit bias makes us see this population as less than human, making us less likely to assist. Explicit bias. Single mothers often face discrimination from bias due to age, family size, low income, etc. And those with a low socioeconomic status are often denied housing, which leads to homelessness. Homelessness is something that's faced across the world. There's not a region in the world that has less influence on homelessness. There are regions such as Finland and Tokyo that have significantly reduced homeless populations due to governmental intervention, such as increased housing opportunities, increased placement of these individuals to have them not sleep on the streets. And here are my references.